Said, yeah, if you move here and train full time, maybe in 5 years you can make the U.S. team. And I moved there thinking I'd make it the first year, of course, and then the second year, and then the third year, and then the fourth year. Fifth year, I finally made the U.S. team, just like you said. And that was in 1989, so it was my first year on the U.S. team. And that's kind of where, from 84 to 89, that was like my build up to try to be the best kayaker out there. And that's kind of where my real career started as a whitewater kayaker.
That's amazing. So you've experienced so many different times out on the river. So I understand that he learned from the best. He couldn't have gotten there on his own.
I mean, he could have gotten there on his own, I'm sure, but certainly growing up with me, competing and winning, and me training and constant coaching and whatever, it's definitely a huge advantage.
Welcome to another edition of Community Insider. Join us as we travel Middle Tennessee, uncovering history and experiencing the adventure of unique stories and events coming to you inside your community.
"51 of the best paddlers have gathered to go head-to-head, led by Eric Jackson. Our oldest competitor in the field at 36 years of age, but also coming off a win at the Pre-Worlds in Spain, and joined in the semifinals by his best friend, Dan Gavir. In the semifinal, coming out of BZ corners, Eric Jackson with his usual fast start. Keith Lyles and Ethan Winger, top paddlers, also in this semifinal. Jackson, with his signature finish, would advance along with his pal, Dan Gavir. The kayakers go head-to-head, but Eric Jackson seems to thrive on this.
It's definitely a major advantage to get into the front early on. Eric's got only the river in front of him, and the other kayakers have to place themselves with the river and the other boaters.
Jackson through Maytag cleanly, but in a little trouble here.
I think he's fine. He's right on his line. Actually, you rarely go straight down a river in kayaking because you want to keep your nose up so it doesn't dive.
And maybe more than a little cocky past the second gate. Eric Jackson in control and easily a winner.
There's this one move I've envisioned for a long time, like for 5 years. There's this move called the stunt double, where I perched myself on top of this rock about 20 feet above the water, right down by the powerhouse, and I do a backflip off the rock, and then land in vertically and plug my boat in, and then bounce back out and do a front flip out of it. Anyway, it's technically extremely difficult. I've never been able to pull it off. I've tried it a bunch of times, and it doesn't go well. It's very painful. So it's not like 100 people are going to go try it. Maybe, I don't know, my son Dan and I are the only ones that have ever tried that move, put it that way.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Community Insider. We're here at the home of four-time world champion kayaker, Mr. E.J. Jackson himself. So tell me about how your career in kayaking actually began.
Hey Tisha, how you doing? Thanks for coming and joining me here at Rock Island, Tennessee, my favorite place. So kayaking, good question. I was lucky enough to have a dad that was an adventure kind of a guy. He was a Green Beret, and he was an engineer at Piper Aircraft making airplanes, and all the test pilots there got together and started whitewater canoeing. I was 6 years old, and my dad brought me on my first canoe trip with him and his friends. And one of the guys, Wilford Kling, had his own homemade kayak, and I, for whatever reason, I really wanted to paddle that instead of the canoe. And Wilford let me paddle it and some of the flatwater stuff, and I was pretty much hooked. I did that from 6 to 10 years old. Every year we'd go on these little trips, and we didn't own kayaks, we owned a canoe. We moved to Florida for 4 years, where I went bass fishing every day. There was no whitewater down there, so I didn't get to go kayaking down there. But I really got my passion for bass fishing in Florida. When I was 15, we moved up to New Hampshire, and we moved there because my dad got a new job and wanted to go whitewatering again. And we went to a store to buy a canoe, but there was these kayaks hanging there, and we decided that, I don't know if it was me or him or both of us, like, oh, we should do that. So we bought 2 kayaks instead, and that was proved to be a really good purchase. That first year, I got pretty good at it, and I was actually offered a job as a whitewater photographer on the Kennebec River up in Maine, where I would paddle down the rapids, get out, take photos of the rafters going by, then catch up and take more photos, and then paddle down and develop the film and sell them 8x10s at the 8. This is before digital, of course. And in that one summer on the Kennebec River, which is really good as a class 4-5 whitewater section, I got really good at kayaking, and I saw a kid paddling by that had a USA on his paddle jacket, and I followed him down, like, what's USA? Why do you have USA? He's like, oh, I'm on the US kayak team. I'm like, what? There's a US kayak team? And that's where I really got the concept. I always wanted to be in the Olympics, and I was a swimmer. I was a state champion swimmer, but it wasn't, the kayaking was way more fun for me. And I was like, I'm going to do that. So I kind of committed to making the US kayak team. That was in 1984. I was at University of Maine at the time, and I transferred to University of Maryland where the US team trained. The coach scouted me and said, yeah, if you move here and train full time, maybe in 5 years you can make the US team. And I moved there thinking I'd make it the first year, of course, and then the second year, and then the third year, and then the fourth year. 5th year, I finally made the US team, just like you said. And that was in 1989, so it was my first year on the US team. And that's kind of where, from 84 to 89, that was like my build up to try to be the best kayaker out there. And that's kind of where my real career started as a whitewater kayaker.
That's amazing. So you've experienced so many different times out on the river. What is the most memorable kayaking experience that you've had?
There's so many of them. They're so different, whether it be competing in the Olympics is one type of one, winning my first world championships, extremely memorable, taking my kids to the Zambezi River in Zimbabwe and Zambia border, right below Victoria Falls. That particular trip where we went as a family was definitely one of my most memorable ones. I mean, there's so many, and they all come in different categories. A lot of my most memorable ones are ones with my family, or new trips, new rivers that I'm on that nobody's done before, that type of thing. I couldn't narrow it down to just one. It's just, and then hopefully my most memorable ones will be more of them next year too.
So you're really family oriented. Tell me about Dane and Emily.
So Dane and Emily, those are my older kids. I have 3 kids, Dane, Emily, and Casey. Emily's first. She was born in 1990, so she's 29 or whatever she is right now. Anyway, she's 29 years old. Married with 2 kids now. She's married to my son-in-law, Nick, who's also a world champion kayaker. And then my son, Dane, is born in 93, so he's 26 years old. Well, when they, in 97, when they were 4 and 7 years old, we moved into an RV full-time and just traveled full-time for me to go kayaking in all the spots. And they both developed an interest in paddling. And eventually, when they were 9 and 12 years old, they really committed to kayaking. Like, they learned to roll, and they could run all the rivers with me, not all the hard ones, but the easier ones. And they actually started competing. And the next year, when they were 10 and 13 years old, we went to the pre-world championships in Australia, an event that I won. And Emily was 3rd in the junior women's, and my son Dane was like 8th in the junior men's. And then the next year we went to the world championships. It was the first time they represented the US, and we were all competing. And that was like a dream of mine for my whole life. Like, I've been on the US team since '89, and I have these little kids that are being born. And I man, it wouldn't be cool if I could still be on the US team when my kids are good enough to make the US team. And sure enough, I was able to do that. And they were juniors, and then they've been on the US team every year since then. And then I got to where my daughter's a senior and my son's a senior. So my son and I are on the US team as in the senior class, and that was like at the time, long time ago, I was like, man, I don't know if that would ever happen, but that was pretty awesome. So they're my kayaking partners in crime. So and then adding my son-in-law Nick, who who beat me at the World Championships in 2009. I was second to him. The same year he married my daughter. So he's part of the family also. So we're all like a little training pod here at Rock Island.
That's amazing. So I understand that Dane is catching up with you in the World Championships.
Yeah, catching up, that's an understatement. Dane has surpassed me, and my son-in-law Nick also. Both of them passed me. I guess 2009, my son-in-law Nick beat me. My son Dane was a junior still, but he was beating me in some competitions. More recently, in the last few years, I've only beat them a handful of times. They beat me almost every time. My son Dane is now crushing it. He just won like every major event this year. He won the World Championships for freestyle, the World Championships for extreme racing, the GoPro Games freestyle, extreme race, the North Fork, all these major events he's won just in the last couple months. So anyway, yeah, he's taken over that dominant position that I've had for about a 15-year period in the 90s and early 2000s.
So I understand that he learned from the best. He couldn't have gotten there on his own.
I mean, he could have got there on his own, I'm sure, but certainly growing up with me, competing and winning, and me training him, constant coaching and whatever, it's definitely a huge advantage. But his drive and his motivation is really what carries him. So he would have been successful with it without me. Class, she's just like unbelievable. This was unfortunately at first, like she got 5th in the World Championships, and she could have won that. So she could have had a better World Championships. But if you see what she's done over the years, it's been like pretty unbelievable. She's won 3 World Championships, and she's had seasons where she's literally not lost an event. So.
That's amazing. So you're a world champion kayaker, and you taught your children. But I also learned that you're also a coach and you like to be able to teach other kayakers as well. Tell me about that.
A long time ago, one of the things that really frustrated me was that there was the best people in the world, the current world champions back in the 70s and 80s when I was really beginning to kayak. Those people never shared their knowledge with anybody else. They kind of hoarded it to themselves. And not that selfishly, it just wasn't, they never thought of it as their job to share their knowledge. And then they'd just retire and get a job and off they'd go. And they'd take all their knowledge with them. I thought that wasn't really, I also wasn't impressed with the instruction materials out there. So 2 things, I questioned the current instruction, which was a good thing to do because I started realizing from the beginning that, or pretty early on, that what people were telling me how to do things was completely wrong. All the books and the American Canoe Association instructor stuff, it was just all bad information. And so I started both questioning all the practices, trying to come up with best practices, and then try to document it. So writing books, creating DVDs or VHS at the time. And it was helpful for me to really put my thoughts down and make things concise and really develop all the rules of how kayaking works and whatever, and best practices. And then, but I also did it face-to-face. I had a kayak school, adventure schools, where I taught a lot of people. In fact, one of your friends, Tanya Schumann, that you know, Eric Southwick, was an instructor of mine. Tanya Schumann took her first beginner class in my kayak school way back when. Anyway, we had a lot of, so I had a kayak school, so we're using that as a kind of a feeder ground for all these techniques. And then coaching, I was head of Team Wave Sport, where a lot of these people, where I was on wave sport kayaks, and I would help do coaching camps, and I'm trying to win myself and help others, and we became the strongest team in the industry. And then when I started Jackson Kayak, of course, I wanted to have the strongest team, so I would coach all my teammates and whatever, and ultimately they brought a lot to the table too, so it was a shared thing. But with that, we were able to just create the best paddlers in the world. In particular, right here in Tennessee, at Rock Island, my river's right there.
Yeah.
We had, literally, if you look at the World Championships for freestyle kayaking, almost every gold medal has been won from somebody right here. And the reason, is either in the men's class, women's class, junior class. Our little training pod of really good kayakers, myself, my son, my daughter, Clay Wright, Stephen Wright, and others that have been guests here that spend months at a time here. My son-in-law, Nick, of course. We're all training and pushing each other and coaching each other, and we keep getting better and better, and ultimately left the rest of the world behind. And all of us were the ones that would go and pretty much dominate all the events for a really long time. And that was really cool. And all that came from the combination of really the great resources we have here in the Caney Fork River and all the surrounding creeks, and also just the training pod that we had.
So we saw something on YouTube where you're doing this trick called the stunt double.
Okay.
Tell me about that. That's amazing.
Oh, thank you. Well, in the process of freestyle kayaking is a growth sport, meaning it's a relatively young sport, and I've been lucky enough to be on the front end of the wave of that sport, and I'm leading that sport with designing new product that makes the moves you can do and the things you can do better and easier, but also developing new moves that we're competing with, new tricks and stuff like that. And so I've developed a lot of them over the years, and I hadn't developed a new move since 2000, a new move that's like regularly used since like 2005. So it's been like 14 years since my latest like really cool, like this is a new trick. And just last season, I was developing a new kayak called the Rockstar. It's my 4th generation. It's called the Rockstar 4.0, and it has more volume. It really gets bigger air. And there's this one move I've envisioned for a long time, like for 5 years. There's this move called the stunt double, where I perch myself on top of this rock about 20 feet above the water, right down by the powerhouse, and I do a backflip off the rock, and then land in vertically and plug my boat in, and then bounce back out and do a front flip out of it. Anyway, it's technically extremely difficult. I've never been able to pull it off. I've tried it a bunch of times, and it doesn't go well. It's very painful. So it's not like 100 people are going to go try it. Maybe, I don't know, my son Dane and I are the only ones that have ever tried that move, put it that way. But when I got this brand new boat, the Rockstar, literally just got it out of the mold, assembled it at the factory, took it straight to the river, and I knew this boat was the boat that would make this move more possible and easier. And if it went well, it'd go really good. And I brought a photographer, like, you got to come because I'm going to try this move, and I think I'm going to get it. Sure enough, my first try, I pulled it off, and the video that I'm sharing with you here is my first attempt at it. Anyway, so I decided to call it the stunt double because it's like a stunt, more of a stunt than a trick. It's not something that everybody's going to try because it's kind of scary and dangerous, and when it doesn't go well, it hurts. And to actually pull it off, you have to land like a margin for error of about 2 degrees of landing angle, and body position has to be right and everything. And then you just have to have the guts to get up in there and do it. So anyway, it's not something that's going to take off. You're not going to see 100 people doing the stunt double anytime soon. So right now, my son Dane and I are the only ones that have ever even tried it and ever done it. So
that's awesome.
Thanks.
So what actually is going to happen with Mr. Jackson here in the future? My next 30-year competitive career, I'm still competing in whitewater kayaking. I got a couple third places this year on the Colorado tour. I didn't make the U.S. kayak team this year. I was alternate, so I got 6th place. It's only the second time in almost 30 years that I've not made the U.S. team. But I'm into fishing now. So fishing has been a passion of mine since I was in Florida. I got into bass fishing down there. I've always wanted to be a pro bass fisherman. So my next 30-year career is being a pro bass fisherman. And I now fish the FLW tour. It's my 4th season. I'm just coming off of Lake Champlain, where I took 2nd place, won $30,000, really close to the win, which was $125,000. You can watch FLW live. Just Google, search on YouTube, Lake Champlain FLW live, and you can watch me for 5 hours fishing on Lake Champlain if you want it. Anyway, and also my kayak fishing tournament career. Now, kayak fishing has a lot of tournaments, but the big leagues right now is in the bass boats, so that's where I want to compete on the big leagues. Now kayak fishing is starting to catch up.
meaning there's a lot of tournaments in kayak fishing. It's getting way more competitive. A lot of amazing anglers in kayak fishing, so I'm starting to turn my attention more to that as well. Staying to obviously make kayak fishing boats. I just won the Pan Am Bass Kayak Fishing Championships last month. My first big kayak fishing tournament I've competed in. And so anyway, my fishing, I want to be the dominant fisherman out there, the next Kevin Van Dam of bass fishing, for example. So I want to be the EJ of bass fishing, the EJ of kayaking, and transfer that to bass fishing. And it's a new challenge for me, and it's something I really enjoy. And I'm 55 years old, and I'm still really competitive in whitewater kayaking. But a lot of the stuff that we're doing, whether or not I want to keep training for that, when I'm 80, I don't know, but I can be 80 and like slinging lures as good as any 20-year-old in bass fishing, I figure, right? So anyway, it's my next 30-year career.
That's amazing. Yeah. So thank you so much for talking with us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. All Thanks for coming and checking out the factory and here at the Jackson Ranch.
Absolutely. And we look forward to seeing you inside your community.